radio for the Agile community. www.Agile.FM.
Welcome to another episode of Agile.FM. Today I have Richard Kasperowski with me. He's a speaker, author, instructor. He's out of Boston area. His email is r@kasperowski.com. I'm just going to spell that out quick, Kasperowski, because that is a different name, right? Twitter is easier. You made it much easier, Kasper. Richard, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
You're also a podcaster, so this is podcast to podcast, right? And we want to talk a little bit about some topics here today. You have two books out there people can easily find, and they can also find the links on the show page on Agile.FM. One is called The High Performing Teams, The Foundations, and you have The Core Protocols, A Guide to Greatness. And you obviously give great credit here to Michelle and Jim McCarthy.
Oh, for sure. It's their work. I'm doing everything I can to spread their work.
Michelle and Jim also have podcasted with me a while back. I think I have to re-release that episode. Some moments you'll never forget. That's one of those. Let's get started talking about some of the topics. Obviously, we'll see how things how we do in terms of the topics. There's so many things we can talk about. Sure. But let's get started on your blog, actually on your website, which also is linked on the show page for people, easy to find. You mentioned that you did some tandem cycling last summer.
Oh, sure.
and you relate that somehow to teamwork. How is that?
Yeah. Well, so the story of the tandem cycling is before we went on air, Joe, I was telling you about this nice woman that I met about 6 years ago, who is now my wife, and that was the origin story of the photo of me with the love sculpture in the background. She guided me toward this great museum in New Orleans. It had an outdoor sculpture garden. That's where that particular love sculpture was. I took a selfie, sent that back to her, and I just decided that one of the things I wanted. The thing I want to do in life is spread love, and that's sort of why that became my profile photo for all occasions, even business. Our first summer vacation together, I guess right after that, she noticed that I like cycling, so she proposed a cycling trip, and she sort of found all the people and made all the arrangements, and we took this great cycling trip along the Loire River Valley in France. Now the thing about it was that I'd been cycling a lot, so I was in good cycling shape, and I felt a lot of pressure. Like I was the stronger cyclist, and so I was typically in front, and I was doing the navigating, and I also had to go slow enough to make sure we were together. If we made a wrong turn, you're on a cycling trip that's like a couple 100 miles. You make a wrong turn, and you go 10 miles out of the way. That means you have to go 10 more miles to get back to where you started, and it turns a nice cycling day into a longer than you hoped for cycling day. The next summer, was it the next summer? Along the way, we had some friends who organized a cycling trip to one of the islands off the coast of Rhode Island. And we rented a crappy tandem for the day. It was rusty and the crank barely turned, and we had a blast. And so the following summer, we spent a week on a tandem. And that week on the tandem was along the Adriatic Sea coast. We went from Italy to Slovenia to Croatia. And we learned a lot about each other as people by sitting on the same bike with each other for a whole week. If you've ever ridden a tandem, you know that the cranks are actually connected to each other. So when I'm pedaling, she's pedaling. When I'm stopping, she's stopping. When I'm shifting gears because of this, she has to know that I'm shifting gear, or else her feet will fall off the pedals. She has to know that I'm about to stop pedaling, or her butt will fall off the saddle. Like she'll keep putting force on her feet, and her hips will rise,
Right.
and she might fall. If we're turning, she has to lean the same way as me to make sure that the bike actually turns and doesn't go forward. If we're going straight, she has to make sure she's not leaning to one side, or else we'll start turning. There's all these little things about controlling the bike together safely and effectively that we discovered we had to talk to each other a lot. And it was great. We actually like talking to each other. And so I define team as any group of 2 or more people aligned with a common goal. Right. So Molly and I, 2 people, that's a team. Common goal. The common goal on the bike is easy and obvious. We want to get from here to there, and we want to do it. We want to feel good while we're doing it,
Right.
and love each other while we're doing it. Love each other by the time we get to the destination.
Right.
So on the bike, on the tandem, we are uniquely single vision. Like we are seeing the same thing. We are going in the same direction. We have exactly the same goals for the day. We're experiencing the same things, over and over. Everything we're doing, it's the same thing, the same experience for both of us. When I want to go faster, I have to tell her. When I want to shift gear, I have to tell her. We get into this mode of really, really high frequency communication with each other that I haven't experienced in a lot of other relationships with anybody. So it's awesome. Riding a tandem is a great example of teamwork. The funny thing people say about tandem cycling is some people look at us on the bike, married couples or unmarried couples. They look at us on the tandem and they're like, "Oh, we could never do that. That would work for us." And so to me, it's kind of like a test of how good your team is or how good your relationship is.
Absolutely, and you're sharing the same goals and the experience. You're also sharing the same potholes. You're going through the same potholes. Whereas if you would be on 2 bikes, you might not have that shared experience. So there's a lot of that. Now, what's interesting is you just mentioned 2 or more people is a team. When I stand in front of people, I often refer to as 3 or more. I say 2 is a pair, not a team.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But obviously there's something about communication channels, right? And what you just said, there's very fast communication, obviously on a tandem, and that's sometimes needed. Sharp turns, etc., right? Obstacles.
And sharing what we're good at with each other. I'm good at piloting the bike. She's great at navigating. Turns out I don't have to think as hard. Like we're actually sharing the responsibilities. We're actually a team when we're doing that together.
Right. Very cool. So I invite everybody to go to that site, get a little bit more reading on the tandem experience. But I want to touch a little bit on another topic. I watched a video of yours, and I think it was an Agile gaming conference, maybe in India, possibly.
Okay.
And you did some really interesting self-organization exercises.
Sure.
You do a lot of those games. Agile Gaming Conference. There's also one up in Boston. I'm not sure if you're part of that.
I'm very much part of that. I'm on the board of directors of Agile New England, and we produce that conference along with the Mob Programming Conference.
Yeah, I know a few people from that include games. I have games in my courses, workshops, etc. all the time. But I want to hear from you. Obviously, why do you think it's so important that games are part of our work experience, not only after work experience?
Yeah, I guess games are good, right? Games are things that you do voluntarily. You do them for fun. Sort of quoting Dan Mezek's spiel about games. They're voluntary. You have fun. There's an easy way to gauge progress and so on. Games. In Agile, we use them for a couple of things, right? We use them for teaching Agile, and we use them for getting work done. So as far as getting work done, we've got these games, these activities. Well, like Scrum itself is a game. A lot of people are using Scrum to get their work done. If you look at the title page of the Scrum Guide, it actually says it's the rules of the game. Right? So Scrum is a game that people can play at work to get stuff done. We use other games at work like planning poker, and there's a lot of other activities that people can use to help them get their work done. And then for learning, if you look into the pedagogy literature, one of the great ways that people actually learn things in a way that they can use the skills later on is to experience the skills. So a lot of what we do with Agile games in a class setting is to give people experiences that really trigger things deep in their body, maybe trigger emotional responses, trigger things in a way that they can use what they learned later on in their work or in their life.
So from a playful's perspective, right? So there's obviously some of the games I have seen, they're going very, very playful, where you as an instructor really have to take sometimes things back and make a reference back to the workplace.
Right.
It's like, how does this even relate? So how do you feel about those games also, like very, very playful, where some adults, feel like, okay, where's this going? Why are we doing this, right? How do you feel about that?
I feel great about it. If you look at the best learning environments, the best learning environments are kind of like kindergarten. Right. This is where people are learning at incredible velocity, and they're not just sitting in a chair being talked at. They're creating things. They're making art. They're writing the letters of the alphabet. They're singing songs together and using hand motions as they sing the songs together. They're using all of their body, all of their mind, all of their soul to learn, and it's fun. And it seems like as we get older, that fun starts to leave education, and people start to dislike learning because of this. Like learning is boring is what a lot of people end up learning about school. So whatever we can do to help people have a positive experience, to sort of ignite their brains in a positive way, opens them up to learning and actually helps them retain and reuse the skills later on.
Great. This is a great confirmation for everybody out there listening to this. Play some games, tie them back to work, obviously, or use them at least as a serious icebreaker. So that people see the need for playing games, even if it's just Scrum, right?
Yeah, and an important part of any activity that you do in a classroom, or an important facilitator skill is anytime you do an activity, you debrief with the participants at the end. And as the learning facilitator, you can use that debrief time to tie things back to how this is a useful skill for work, and why that was an important way to spend 5 or 10 minutes in the class.
Yeah, definitely. Let's touch on a few other topics as well here. I mean, we could go very deep on any of these topics, and maybe that is something we have to do at a later point in time. We just pick one and do another recording and just take a deeper dive. But I just want to also showcase your breadth of work here, and maybe we just go to the core protocols quick.
Sure.
Michelle, we mentioned them earlier. Michelle and Jim McCarthy have been instrumental. I'm pretty sure you have met them. And I have to admit, have not read the book, right? But I do want to just see from your perspective how, because Michelle and Jim are not necessarily connected 100% to the Agile community. They're driving the core protocols, right? But what I would be interested in from you, obviously, maybe there's material in the book. How do the core protocols connect with the Agile world? Why do you think they're so interesting and powerful that you actually wrote a book about it?
Yeah. Let's see. So how does it connect with the Agile world? Agile is, if you look at the Agile Manifesto, it's got a list of 4 values there. It's about individuals and interactions as something very important. It's about working software as something very important, and sustainable pace and all these sorts of things in the values and principles of the Agile Manifesto.
Sure thing.
The origin of the core protocols is embedded in exactly those same sets of values and principles. So the origin of the core protocols goes back to work that Jim and Michelle were doing at Microsoft. It's kind of funny. I just watched a video that Jim produced back in 1995 about sort of sharing some of the early ideas before this was even encoded in what they called the core protocols. Mm-hmm. It was all about getting a group of people aligned on what they want to build, getting people into a state of shared vision so that they're all working on the same thing together. Mm-hmm. That's one thing. Another thing is it's about releasing everybody's genius, everybody's intelligence, and collecting it together into an aggregate genius. In this video I saw last night, Jim talked about, there's a guy on the team, his IQ is maybe 120. That's really good, right? Mm-hmm. But there's 150 people on the team, so we don't want just that one person doing all the design and architecture. We want all 150 people doing it, and then we end up with like a team IQ of like 7,000. Right. Mm-hmm. That's actually what we want. Like this super genius, right, working on this product, getting it done really well, getting it done on time. And the third thing was that they noticed it's not just about being aligned on the work. It's about being emotionally connected to each other and to the work. And when they connected all those things together, that team that they worked with at Microsoft was incredibly successful. Mm-hmm. Like as a team, people still talk about them today, and as a product, people still talk about the product they built. It was like successful in a historic sense, even. Mm-hmm. And that was the origin of the core protocols. And it really developed in this atmosphere of great software development and delivery, and that's what Agile's about. So it's the same thing, or at least it's very, very congruent.
Yeah. So really going into the direction of swarming as a team or cross-functional teams. Really connect with the core protocols. Yeah, right.
Yeah, and look at Scrum. Scrum. One of the things that you get from Scrum is the ability to deliver a working product very frequently, like every whatever that is for you, maybe every week or 2 weeks. That was their goal. Mm-hmm. This was before the Agile Manifesto. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of pre-Agile, or it's one of the seedlings that flourished as Agile.
Yeah.
Jim and Michelle wrote a book called Dynamics of Software Development, in which they shared a lot of these ideas. And if you go back and read that book, it's from the 90s, so mm-hmm. it's sort of historic in one sense, and it's very current and relevant in another sense. The things they talk about in that book, it's about shared vision and good technical skills, and if you look at the state of the team is reflected in the state of the software.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And if you look at the state of the software, it's exactly reflected in the state of the team. These are ideas that all of us who work in Agile continue to use.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, some people are listening to this, and especially that statement you just made, there's a connect between the state of the software and the state of the team. Some people will get nervous thinking maybe about their own teams at this point. Right? Michelle and Jim, they released those core protocols. How's your book in particular an extension to that work? What is it you're taking? I don't know if you're connecting it with the Agile world, but what is the add to the core protocols here?
So the first book, I take their material, the core protocols, which they kindly GPL'd. Mm-hmm. So I included the core protocols in the first book, and I added on a few protocols in addition to that to help people share the protocols with their team. And protocols, schmotocols. It's really success patterns for high performing teams of any kind, software development or anything else. The second book is much more expository. It's more about the science and research on high performing teams, and a lot about like how and why it works, and tips for using these behavior patterns successfully with your teams.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe we explore that topic a little bit, right? So high performing teams. So I think this is all, and thanks for Michelle and Jim to make the material available, right? And while we're talking about it, I just think I have to re-release this episode with him and her.
For sure.
It's somewhere under a different label, and I want to re-release that for sure. High performing teams.
Yeah.
You have a workshop out there about high performing teams. When we say high, right? Obviously, there's a little bit ambiguous. So is low, right? Why don't we just take a stab at a little bit at that? Obviously, the bar of high and low might grow as an industry. Also, everybody might have a different perception of high and low. But what is a high-performing team, and what does a workshop of high-performing or increasing the performance on a team actually do?
Yeah, so we defined team. I defined team as 2 or more people along with a common goal. You define it as 3.
Whatever.
It's a group of people aligned with a common goal. A high-performing team is one of those that is objectively better than other teams doing similar work. Mm-hmm. Right, so it's something you can observe. It's objective. I guess there's some subjective stuff that goes along with that as well, but it's something you could observe. It's something you could measure, and for teams doing similar work. So I don't know. So you probably wouldn't take a baseball team and compare them to a software delivery team, right? They're doing different kinds of work, but you could compare two baseball teams, and you could objectively determine which one is better. Like, you could look at their stats on the ESPN website, or you could have them play each other. It turns out they do this in sports. They play each other, and they objectively determine which team is better. In software, it turns out there are some pretty easy ways to objectively gauge the performance of software teams. And this is sort of thanks to the work that Nicole Forsgren, Jess Humble, and Gene Kim have been doing with the State of DevOps report, and with the book they recently published called Accelerate. So they've figured out from something like 5 or 8 years of research from State of DevOps exactly how to measure the performance of software teams. Right. So there are 4 things that correlate really highly to high performance in software teams. Those things are frequency of deployment to production, right? That's a really easy way to gauge the performance of a software team. Right. Delivery lead time, how long does it take from commit to it's deployed in production? The failure rate when you make a change, is it successful? What's the rate of success? And then when you have a service problem, how long does it take to restore service? Right. So these 4 things, it's really like how long does it take you to deploy to production? How often do you do it? How long does it take you to fix a problem? And how frequently are your deployments successful? Right. Those 4 things are the objective measurements of software team performance.
That's very concrete.
So if you're looking for a high performance team, and we're talking about software or some sort of digital product delivery, that's how you measure high performance. Right. So those measures are like throughput, speed, quality is included in there. These are the things we're looking for from high performing digital delivery teams.
Yeah. So you work on, moving the needle with clients on those 4 items. That's what high performing workshops are, right?
Yeah, and then we've got some other things connected to the general research on high performance teams. So in the more general business research and psychology research on high performance teams, we know that psychological safety correlates to high performance. And then, of course, to measure high performance, this is what the researchers do, so they know that psych safety correlates to high performance. Right. And we know from the research that group emotional intelligence correlates to objective high performance. And there are ways to measure these things. There are ways to measure psych safety and ways to measure team EI.
Richard, I think at this part of the podcast, what we can say after you just spelled out those 4 criterias, if you will, one of them is not listed, and I think this is very important to spell it out because I'm getting these questions all the time. Not a way of measuring a high-performing team would be velocity, right?
So velocity is an interesting thing. Velocity, typically, the way most software delivery teams are using it it's the number of story points the team got done per sprint. So story points are typically an estimate of how big the work is before you start doing it. So velocity, the way most teams use it, is a measurement of an estimate, right? And that's interesting right off the bat. It's not really an output metric anyway, and it's certainly not a metric of value delivered to customers.
Correct. All right. So I just want to make sure we can bury this topic, right? Because because there's so many questions around this, and I feel like it's so repetitive, and I just wanted to spell it out. I think we're in alignment here. Yeah.
I mean, if it's all you got, okay, but it's pretty easy to get to just walk into a place and ask these questions. How long does it take from when you type the Git command and you commit your code? How long does it take from that moment until it's deployed in a production environment? That's lead time. And people just have a sense.
Yeah.
It takes less than an hour. It takes a day. It takes a week. It takes a month, right? Whatever that is. You don't even need precise measurements of it. People just have a sense of the time scale.
Yeah.
And that's all you need to be able to gauge the performance of a digital delivery team.
I think it also shows an additional element, right? All the metrics might not do. It also shows a little bit the environment, right? To go live with something and release something frequently. It also shows you something a little bit about the infrastructure and the environment.
Absolutely.
That all happens.
Yeah, and the repeatability of the deployment and the repeatability of the production environments, and and they have data from many different kinds of environments. Everything from like Netflix style, hundreds or thousands of deployments per hour, to people doing this sort of work with legacy code on mainframes, right? And they know even on legacy code on mainframes, there are high performing teams that that have lead time that's less than 1 hour, and deployment frequency at least one deployment per hour, and so on.
Wow, awesome. Let's get back to that one statement you made earlier about the connect between the state of the software and the state of the team. and let's say the state of the software is toxic. Let's say the team is toxic. How do let's say somebody's listening to our conversation here right now and says, is there anything I can spot which really immediately tells me there is some toxicity going on in a team, or like some indicators where where we need to put people into a high performing workshop?
Yeah, right. So people, I think people just know. You can ask. And if it's safe enough for them to say so, they'll tell you. The way Jim McCarthy says it, team equals software, is very similar to Melvin Conway's law from way back in 1968. Organizations that design systems are constrained to produce the designs that are copies of the communication structures of those organizations, right? The architecture of your code is the same thing as the architecture of your people structure. The relationships between code modules is exactly the same as the relationships between the people. If people are siloed and they're not allowed to talk to each other, you'll notice that the various components in the software are siloed and don't communicate well with each other. If people are free to solve problems and just get stuff done, you'll notice that the software does the same. If the organization is beautiful, you'll probably notice the software is beautiful, both internally and externally. You can just ask. You can measure these things, right? So, like I said, you could ask the people, and if they feel safe enough, they'll just tell you. You can measure safety, right? Psychological safety. People have been talking about this since the 90s, at least. You can measure it. There are easy survey-based diagnostics that you can use to measure psychological safety in a team or in an organization. If you measure it and it's low, well, chances are your software teams are underperforming. Your throughput is low. The quality is low. Just like the quality of the relationships in the teammates is probably low. These are good clues that you might want to do something like a workshop to improve the performance of the relationships in the people. And this is kind of like what the high performance teams workshops that I run are about.
negativity on teams, something I very often observe, right? When team members, or there is a team, but there is a team within a team, and there's some negativity going on, sarcasm and so on, right? Beyond, let's say, the humor piece of it, which I would enjoy myself, but there's a limit to it, right? On a team, right?
Like how much time do you want to spend on negativity? How much energy do you want to put there? Where we could be creating together and creating something awesome that changes the world in some way. That's
correct. Well, changing the world, I want to touch towards the end of our conversation here, at least for part one here, with something I noticed on your site about open space. You seem to enjoy open space. I'm a big fan of open space. You mentioned the name Dan Masick, who was just recently on the show with Open Space Agility. What attracts you to open space? The number of people who like open space is constantly growing, which is a good thing, I believe. But I just want to hear from you. Why are you using this tool? What are you using it for? And where do you see the opportunities?
Okay, so open space, I use it for everything. Just in general, keeping the space open, keeping people available to each other, giving people voice, and this idea of equal voice, that's a characteristic of high performance teams. When people's voices are heard, when people feel safe sharing what they think and sharing their creative ideas, that's when teams are high performing. Open space is one way to sort of facilitate people into that state. One common use for it is as a way to run a conference or a session at a conference. This is great. Just a way to help people form community very quickly, to connect with each other very quickly and start sharing ideas and growing that fresh community right away. Another way to use open space is to solve a problem that a company has or an organization has. Right. So I help organizations solve problems using open space. I'm going to be working with a client in a couple of weeks to help them collectively solve the problem of they've gotten rid of performance reviews and they want to figure out, well, how to guide themselves to grow their skills as individuals and as teammates. Right? So we're going to do an open space together to solve that problem. And then you can just use it as a way to do work. So with one team that I managed a few years ago, we used open space for 6 consecutive weeks to solve an important problem together, and kind of just, it was the way we did the everyday work. We used open space as the way we did the everyday work for a month and a half. Right. So lots of different applications. What I really love about it is that it works. It helps people feel safe. It gives people voice. It connects people. It gets people. It sort of induces people to share their best with each other, and get their best collectively as an organization. Yeah.
So use to problem solve, maybe lead a team through some effort of building things. We're also using it for conferences in New York quite a bit. Right? That's a integral part of our conferences here in New York. People love it. So it's application everywhere. And, with the increasing amount of facilitators around the world, I think this is probably a growing topic in the industry.
Yeah, and there's actually no barrier to becoming a facilitator. Just look up open space. If anybody wants a script to use, I have a script that I share with people.
Awesome.
You just follow the script, and you've got open space happening. It's easy.
All right. Hey, Richard, I just think this is a good breaking point. We covered a few topics around tandem cycling, core protocols, high-performing teams, toxicity, open space. I think we covered some ground here.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Thanks a lot for having me.
Awesome. And for everybody out there, Richard Kasperowski, his website, all available, all the links, his books, etc., on the Agile.FM website. Thank you so much, Richard.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Agile.FM, the radio for the Agile community. I'm your host, Joe Krebs. If you're interested in more programming and additional podcasts, please go to www.agile.fm. Talk to you soon.